The hum of the private jet was low, steady, almost soothing, but inside the cabin, the atmosphere was anything but calm. The plush leather seats, polished mahogany tables, and chilled champagne bottles painted a picture of elegance and power. Yet for Emily Carter, sitting in the farthest corner with her hands protectively covering her 6-month pregnant belly, that luxury felt like a cage. Her heart was pounding, her eyes were burning, and every sound from across the aisle cut deeper into her soul. Her husband, Adrian Carter, was leaning back comfortably in one of the oversized seats, a glass of whiskey in his hand. His tie was loosened, his smile smug, his laughter filling the cabin. Next to him, draped in a shimmering silver dress that left little to the imagination, sat Vanessa Moore, his lover. Her manicured fingers rested boldly on Adrian's arm, her red lips brushing against his ear as she whispered something that made him roar with laughter. It wasn't just intimacy, it was a public display meant to humiliate. Emily could feel every pair of eyes flicking between her and the couple across the cabin. A few business partners, 2 high-profile investors, and even the flight attendants had been forced to witness the ugly scene. Everyone knew Adrian was married. Everyone knew she was his wife. And yet, here he was, flaunting his mistress before them like she didn't even exist. She blinked rapidly, willing herself not to cry. Crying would only make it worse. Crying would give Vanessa the satisfaction she clearly wanted. Because Vanessa wasn't subtle. Every time she leaned closer to Adrian, she shot a triumphant glance at Emily, like a cat playing with a wounded bird. Her laugh was sharp, shrill, and cutting. Emily shifted uncomfortably in her seat, feeling her baby move beneath her ribs. She whispered under her breath, "It's okay, sweetheart. Mom is here. We'll be fine." But deep inside, she didn't believe her own words. She felt trapped in a marriage that had become a nightmare, trapped on a jet where she couldn't escape, trapped in humiliation that cut her deeper than any blade could. Adrian raised his glass in mock celebration, turning his head just enough to look at her. "Cheer up, Emily," he said loudly, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You should be happy. Not everyone gets to fly to Paris on a jet like this. You should try smiling. You look pathetic." The room chuckled awkwardly. The investors exchanged glances, some embarrassed, some entertained. Emily's cheeks flushed with heat, but she didn't respond. She had learned long ago that answering Adrian in public only made things worse. He thrived on her pain. He enjoyed showing the world how little she mattered to him now. Vanessa leaned into him, her perfume filling the air. "She's just jealous, darling," she purred loud enough for everyone to hear. "Not every woman can keep a man like you." Then she tilted her head back and laughed, a cruel, triumphant laugh that sliced through Emily's chest. Emily's fingers tightened on the armrest. The baby kicked again, as if sensing her distress. For a moment, she thought she might collapse. The humiliation was unbearable, but it was the betrayal that shattered her. Once upon a time, Adrian had been the man she trusted with her life, the man who promised to love her through every thwart. The jet hit a pocket of turbulence, jolting the passengers. Vanessa shrieked playfully and clutched Adrian's arm, while he chuckled and reassured her. Emily steadied herself with one hand on her belly. The irony wasn't lost on her. Her husband could comfort his mistress, but he had never once asked her if she was comfortable during this pregnancy. The silence that followed the turbulence was heavy. Emily tried to focus on the hum of the engines, on her breathing, on anything that would keep her from breaking down in front of these people. But then Vanessa's voice rang out again, sharp as a knife. "Tell me, Emily," she sneered, turning her head deliberately. "Do you ever wonder why he chose me? Why he prefers my company instead of yours?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Adrian smirked, taking another sip of his drink, not even attempting to defend his wife. The investors leaned forward, uncomfortable but curious. Emily swallowed hard, her throat tight. She wanted to scream, to cry, to demand respect, but the words caught in her chest. She sat frozen, her silence only feeding their cruelty. Vanessa leaned closer, her eyes glinting with malice. "It's simple, really. Some women are meant to be admired, cherished, desired." She tilted her head smugly. "And others, well, they're just meant to be forgotten." The cabin erupted in soft laughter, muffled whispers, and clicking glasses. Emily's eyes blurred with tears she refused to let fall. She turned her gaze to the small oval window, the night sky stretching endlessly outside. Stars blinked faintly, mocking her with their distance. Her stomach churned, her heart ached, and in that moment she realized she was completely alone. Adrian had abandoned her emotionally long before this night, and now he was stripping her dignity in front of the world. But what she didn't realize, what no one realized, was that someone else had been watching. Someone who had remained silent, his expression unreadable, his glass untouched. Alexander Carter, Adrian's older brother, sat at the far end of the cabin. A billionaire in his own right, he had built empires with the kind of precision and discipline Adrian had never possessed. His presence was powerful, commanding, yet restrained. Unlike Adrian, he didn't need to flaunt his wealth or charm. He simply existed, and the room bent to his gravity. Throughout the evening, Alexander hadn't said a word. He had observed quietly, his sharp eyes missing nothing: the cruelty, the humiliation, the mockery. Now, as Vanessa's laugh echoed again and Emily's shoulders trembled in silent despair, his jaw tightened, his knuckles whitened around the stem of his glass. For the first time, he leaned forward, his voice cutting through the cabin like steel. "That's enough." The laughter died instantly. All eyes turned to him. Adrian froze, the smirk slipping from his face. Vanessa blinked, her painted lips parting in shock. And Emily, wide-eyed, looked up at the man she had barely dared to acknowledge until now, because what Alexander was about to do would change everything. The silence that followed Alexander's words was deafening. The private jet, once filled with laughter and arrogance, now felt colder, tighter, almost suffocating. Everyone turned to look at him, their surprise clear. Adrian shifted uncomfortably in his seat, caught between irritation and unease. Vanessa's confident smirk faltered, her perfectly manicured nails tapping nervously on the rim of her glass. Emily sat frozen, her wide eyes fixed on Alexander. For a moment, just a brief, fleeting moment, she felt like someone had finally seen her, seen the humiliation, the cruelty, the quiet suffering. But that moment of fragile relief was short-lived. Adrian let out a dry laugh, shaking his head. "Come on, Alex," he sneered, raising his glass toward his brother. "Don't tell me you're taking her side. She's my wife, not yours. If I want to joke with her, I will." "Joke?" Alexander's voice was calm, dangerously calm. "That didn't sound like a joke to me." Adrian's eyes narrowed, but instead of answering, he leaned back in his seat, pretending not to care. Vanessa, however, wasn't ready to back down. She leaned forward, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. "Honestly, Alexander, you shouldn't waste your concern. Some women just don't know how to keep their husbands happy. Emily had her chance. Now it's my turn." The words sliced through the cabin like glass. Emily flinched, her hands instinctively clutching her belly. Heat rose to her face, her humiliation growing unbearable. She wanted to disappear, to vanish into thin air, but she couldn't. She was trapped in this flying prison, forced to listen as the woman her husband paraded beside him mocked her existence. Adrian chuckled, clearly entertained. "Vanessa's right. Emily, you've been lacking. I deserve more. I deserve a woman who understands me, who doesn't drag me down with her mood swings and demands." He gestured toward Vanessa with a smug grin. "That's why she's here. She makes me feel alive." Gasps rippled through the cabin. Even the investors shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This was no longer just gossip. It was cruelty, delivered with an audience. Emily's chest tightened. She bit her lip so hard she tasted blood, fighting back the sob clawing at her throat. But before she could respond, Vanessa stood. The click of her heels on the polished floor echoed like a countdown. She walked across the narrow aisle, stopping in front of Emily's seat. "Let's be honest," Vanessa sneered, folding her arms across her chest. "Look at you, sitting there like a wounded animal, hiding behind your belly. Do you think pity will keep a man? Do you think being pregnant makes you special? Women get pregnant every day." Emily's breath hitched, her hands tightened over her stomach, as if shielding her unborn child from the venom spilling from this woman's mouth. Vanessa leaned down, her face inches from Emily's. Her perfume was overwhelming, sharp and nauseating. Her voice dropped into a whisper meant to sting deeper. "He doesn't love you anymore. He never will. You're nothing but dead weight." Then, in one swift, shocking motion, Vanessa's hand shot out. She grabbed a fistful of Emily's hair and yanked. Emily gasped, a cry of pain ripping from her throat as her head snapped back. The sudden jolt nearly threw her from her seat. Panic surged through her body, her heart racing, her arms instinctively wrapping around her belly to protect her baby. The cabin erupted. Gasps, shouts, the scrape of chairs against the floor. One of the investors half rose from his seat in shock. The flight attendant dropped the bottle she was holding, glass shattering across the floor. But the loudest sound was Adrian's laugh. He didn't move to stop Vanessa. He didn't protect his pregnant wife. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, grinning, enjoying the spectacle like it was entertainment. "Careful, Vanessa," he drawled, smirking. "Don't hurt her too much. She's fragile." Emily's tears blurred her vision as pain burned across her scalp. Her humiliation was complete. Her husband had allowed his mistress to lay hands on her, on his pregnant wife, and instead of stopping it, he encouraged it. Her chest heaved. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "Adrian, please." But her plea was drowned in Vanessa's laughter, cruel and triumphant. "You see? Even she knows she's powerless. She can't fight me. She can't fight anyone." Emily's whole body trembled, her dignity shredded. She felt the weight of every pair of eyes on her, judging, pitying, mocking. She wanted to scream, to fight back, but the fear of harming her baby held her frozen. All she could do was endure the humiliation, her heart breaking with every second. It was Alexander who moved first. His chair scraped back with a suddenness that silenced the cabin. He crossed the aisle in 2 long strides, his presence so commanding that Vanessa's grip faltered. He seized her wrist with a strength that made her gasp and forced her to release Emily's hair. "That's enough," he said, his voice like ice. His glare pinned Vanessa in place, her bravado crumbling under the weight of his authority. "Touch her again, and you'll regret it." Vanessa recoiled, rubbing her wrist, her eyes flashing with fear and fury. Adrian's smirk vanished, replaced by a flicker of unease. For once, he seemed to realize that his brother was not going to ignore his behavior. Emily, her hair disheveled, her cheeks wet with tears, sat trembling in her seat. Her chest rose and fell with ragged breaths. She looked up at Alexander, shock and gratitude mingling in her gaze. No one had ever stood up for her like that, not since her marriage began to crumble. Alexander didn't look at her directly, but his tone softened ever so slightly. "You're safe now," he said quietly, then turned his steely gaze back to Adrian. "You disgust me," he said flatly. "You let another woman assault your pregnant wife, and you laughed. Do you have any idea what kind of man that makes you?" The cabin was silent. Adrian opened his mouth, but no words came. His arrogance was faltering. Emily's tears slowed, but the ache in her chest only grew. She had been humiliated, degraded, almost broken, and yet, in that moment, a seed of something unfamiliar stirred inside her. It wasn't hope, not yet. But it was the faintest whisper of strength, because for the first time someone had seen her pain and refused to let it continue. And she couldn't shake the feeling that this night was only the beginning of what was to come. The cabin of the jet felt like a courtroom, every eye fixed on the tall, imposing figure of Alexander Carter. His presence filled the room, swallowing the smugness that had lingered only moments before. Where Adrian thrived on cheap laughter and cruel games, Alexander carried something heavier, an authority that silenced people without him raising his voice. Emily sat hunched in her seat, her hair disheveled from Vanessa's assault, her body trembling as she clutched her stomach protectively. Tears still glistened on her cheeks, but she was no longer completely alone. For the first time in years, someone had stepped between her and her tormentors. She could hardly breathe as she tried to process what had just happened. Vanessa had backed away, her bravado cracked. Her painted lips parted as she tried to speak, but no sound came out. She had underestimated Alexander. Everyone had. Alexander's gaze swept the room, slow and deliberate. "What you all just witnessed," he said evenly, "was not only shameful, it was criminal." The investors shifted uncomfortably in their seats. These were men used to power plays, to watching fortunes rise and fall like dice in a game. But even they could not ignore the weight of his words. His voice carried something that demanded obedience, like a gavel striking down. Adrian forced a laugh, though his eyes betrayed unease. "Oh, come on, Alex. Don't make this into something it isn't. We were having fun. Emily's too sensitive. Vanessa just got carried away. No harm done." "No harm done?" Alexander's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening. "She's carrying your child, Adrian? Do you even understand what that means? His voice sharpened, slicing through the air. That woman is your wife, the mother of your unborn baby. And you sat there laughing while your mistress assaulted her. The word mistress hung in the air, vulgar and raw. Vanessa flinched. Adrian's expression darkened. For the first time, shame crept across his features, though he quickly tried to mask it with arrogance. You're overreacting, Adrian snapped. This is between me and my wife. Stay out of it. No, Alexander replied, his voice low but firm. It stopped being just between you and her the moment you dragged her dignity through the mud in front of all these witnesses. You humiliated her, Adrian, and by extension, you humiliated this family. The investors exchanged looks. The Carter name carried weight in every corner of the world. To stain it so publicly was dangerous, reckless. Emily swallowed hard, her heart pounding. She had always thought Alexander distant, untouchable, uninterested in her existence. But now, hearing him speak, she realized he had been watching all along, watching and silently judging the cruelty she endured. Adrian's temper flared. He stood abruptly, his glass slamming onto the table, amber liquid spilling over the polished wood. Don't you dare lecture me. You think you're better than me? Because you built a few companies and have the press eating out of your hand? You've never been married? You don't know what it's like. Alexander rose too, his towering frame dwarfing his younger brother's. The contrast between them was stark. Adrian's desperation against Alexander's unshakable composure. I may not be married, Alexander said, his voice calm but edged with steel. But I know what it means to be a man, and a man protects his family. A man doesn't abandon his wife. A man doesn't laugh while the woman carrying his child is attacked. Silence blanketed the cabin. No one dared move. The investors stared. The flight attendants stood frozen, and Emily's breath came in shallow bursts as she clutched her belly tighter. Vanessa tried to recover her composure, stepping forward with a brittle laugh. This is ridiculous. Adrian doesn't need to listen to you. He's his own man. He doesn't need his big brother telling him how to handle his marriage. Alexander turned his head slowly, fixing her with a glare so sharp she stumbled back. You don't belong here, he said coldly. You are nothing but a parasite, feeding off his weakness. This plane is for family, business, and legacy. You are none of those things. Vanessa's cheeks flushed, her lips trembling as her confidence evaporated. For once, she had no clever retort. Adrian reached for her arm, trying to steady her, but Alexander's next words cut through the cabin like a blade. Emily stays, he declared. You leave. Gasps filled the room. Vanessa stared at him in shock. What? You can't just... I can, Alexander interrupted, his voice like thunder. And I will. The Carter name has stood for power, dignity, and loyalty. You've dragged it through filth long enough. Adrian's face reddened. You can't make decisions for me. I'm not some child for you to boss around. Alexander's eyes hardened. You already proved you're no man. If you were, you wouldn't be here flaunting your mistress while your pregnant wife cries in silence. Emily's tears spilled again, but this time they were different. They weren't just tears of pain. They were tears of something new. She felt seen, protected. For years, she had endured Adrian's cruelty alone, and now someone had stood up for her in front of everyone. Her hand trembled as she brushed a tear from her cheek, whispering almost inaudibly, "Thank you." Alexander heard. His gaze flicked to her for the briefest second, softening, before returning to Adrian. "This ends tonight," he said firmly. "When we land, you and I will have a very serious conversation about consequences. But for now," his voice rose, commanding the room. "Not another word against her. Do you understand?" No one dared argue. Not Adrian, not Vanessa, not even the investors who had built their fortunes on confrontation. The cabin was heavy with tension, every breath thick with unspoken truths. Adrian slumped back into his seat, his jaw clenched, his pride wounded but his power slipping. Vanessa sat beside him, pale and shaken, her claws dulled. Emily leaned back slowly, her heart pounding, her body trembling. For the first time in what felt like forever, she wasn't drowning alone. But beneath the fragile relief, another fear simmered. Because if Alexander had stepped in now, what else did he know? And what would happen when all the hidden truths finally came to light? Because one thing was certain, this was only the beginning of Adrian Carter's downfall. The private jet was still in the air, but it felt like the ground had already shifted beneath everyone's feet. The atmosphere was thick, suffocating, and charged with tension. Every passenger, investors, attendants, even the pilots behind the cockpit door, knew they were witnessing something they would never forget. Alexander Carter stood in the center of it all, towering over his younger brother with a calm that radiated more power than Adrian's loud arrogance ever could. His words still echoed in the silence. "This ends tonight." Emily sat quietly, her hands still trembling over her belly. Her body ached from the pull on her hair, her face burned with humiliation, but for the first time in years she felt the faint stirrings of safety. Alexander's presence was like a wall between her and the cruelty that had nearly broken her. Adrian, however, wasn't done. He leaned forward, his expression twisted with frustration. "Don't think you can humiliate me like this, Alex. You may be the so-called golden brother, the billionaire with the perfect image, but I've built my own life. You don't control me." Alexander's eyes narrowed slightly, but his voice remained even. "No, Adrian, you don't control yourself, and that's the problem." He turned slowly, deliberately, toward the investors seated nearby. "Gentlemen, you've seen it with your own eyes. This man, who claims to represent the Carter name, who sits on the board of our ventures, parades his mistress in front of you while degrading his wife, a woman carrying the next heir to our family. Do you trust a man like that to handle your money, your contracts, your partnerships?" The investors stiffened. None dared to speak, but their expressions betrayed unease. They had invested not just in Adrian, but in the Carter name, and now that name was tainted by his recklessness. Adrian's face went pale, then red with fury. "You wouldn't dare." "I just did." Alexander cut him off. His voice rose slightly, carrying the full weight of his authority. "I will not allow you to tarnish what generations have built. Your behavior tonight is more than a personal failure. It's a disgrace to this family, this company, and this legacy." Vanessa scoffed, crossing her arms. "Please, everyone here knows Adrian is the real charmer, not you. You hide behind your billions, but Adrian, he knows how to win people over. That's why he doesn't need your approval." Alexander's gaze snapped to her, sharp as a blade. "You mistake manipulation for charm, and you mistake greed for love. What exactly do you think Adrian has given you, Vanessa? A few dresses? A seat on this jet? Do you know what he's taken to pay for them?" Vanessa blinked, suddenly uncertain. "What are you talking about?" Alexander reached into his briefcase, which had been resting at his side. He pulled out a thin folder and tossed it onto the table with a sharp slap. Papers spilled across the polished wood. "Financial records," he said coldly. "Withdrawals, transfers, unauthorized spending accounts, all tied to Adrian Carter. Hundreds of thousands funneled into hotels, jewelry, and entertainment, most of it with your name attached." The investors leaned forward, eyes widening as they scanned the documents. Murmurs rippled through the cabin. Adrian lunged for the papers, his face contorting with panic. "Those are private. You had no right to." "I have every right," Alexander interrupted, his voice booming. "I warned you months ago, Adrian. I saw the discrepancies. I saw the reckless spending, and I gave you a chance to correct it. Instead, you doubled down. You used company money to fund your affair, to keep this woman satisfied, while your wife sat at home, pregnant, wondering where you were." The room froze. Adrian's betrayal was no longer a private sin whispered about in shadows. It was fact, laid bare under the unforgiving light of evidence. Emily gasped softly, her hand flying to her mouth. She had suspected Adrian of cheating, but she had never known the depth of his deceit. The money, the lies, the betrayal that went beyond their marriage and into business. Adrian's voice cracked as he tried to recover. "You don't understand, Alex. I was going to pay it back. It was temporary. Just a loan." "A loan?" Alexander barked, his composure cracking into controlled fury. "You call stealing from your own company a loan? You've put every investor at risk. You've put our family at risk." Vanessa's face drained of color. She looked at Adrian with wide, panicked eyes. "You told me it was your money. You told me." "Shut up," Adrian hissed, grabbing her arm. But she yanked it away, her voice rising in desperation. "You lied to me? You made me believe you were in control, that you could give me everything. And all this time, you were stealing?" Her shrill voice echoed through the cabin, sealing Adrian's fate. Alexander's gaze cut between them, cold and final. This is what happens when arrogance replaces responsibility, when lust replaces loyalty. You've built your house on lies, Adrian, and tonight, he slammed the folder shut, his tone ringing with judgment, it collapses. The cabin was utterly silent. Adrian sank back into his chair, defeated but still seething, his pride clawing at whatever scraps of dignity he had left. Vanessa sat stiffly beside him, her once smug expression replaced with fear. Emily's chest rose and fell in rapid breaths. She felt like she was watching her life unravel before her eyes. But for once, it wasn't her being torn apart. Adrian's mask had slipped, and the world finally saw him for what he was. Her eyes flicked to Alexander. Gratitude, confusion, and awe collided in her chest. He had destroyed Adrian's facade with surgical precision, and in doing so, he had given her something she thought she had lost forever, the possibility of justice. Alexander straightened, looking down at his brother one last time. When we land, the board will hear of this. You'll answer for every dollar, every lie, every humiliation you've caused. And Emily. He turned toward her, his tone softening. She deserves better. She will get better. Emily's lips parted, her throat tightening. She wanted to thank him, to tell him what his words meant, but the lump in her chest was too heavy. Instead, a single tear slipped down her cheek, glistening in the dim cabin light. And though Adrian sat only a few feet away, for the first time, Emily no longer felt like his prisoner. She felt free. What she didn't know was that freedom came at a price, and the battle was only beginning. The jet sliced through the night sky, but inside, the world was unraveling for Adrian Carter. He sat stiffly in his seat, jaw clenched, sweat beading at his temple. The confident smirk that had carried him through years of deception was gone, stripped away by Alexander's cold precision. Emily sat opposite him, still shaken, her hand resting protectively over her stomach. Her body trembled from the memory of Vanessa's attack, but her eyes, red and swollen from tears, remained fixed on Adrian. She had loved him once. She had carried his burdens, believed his promises, dreamed of their future together. But now, staring at the man before her, she realized he was a stranger. Vanessa, meanwhile, was unraveling in her own way. Her flawless exterior cracked, panic spreading across her painted features. She had built her confidence on Adrian's charm, his whispered promises, his expensive gifts. But with Alexander's revelation, those gifts had turned to ash. They weren't tokens of love. They were stolen trinkets funded by deception. "I can explain," Adrian muttered, his voice shaky but still laced with arrogance. His eyes darted toward the investors, as if appealing for sympathy. "This is being blown out of proportion. It's not what it looks like." Alexander's expression hardened. "Don't insult us further. We've seen the records. We've seen the betrayal. The question now is, what else have you been hiding?" The investors leaned forward, their eyes sharp. They were men who thrived on information, who smelled weakness like wolves circling prey. And Adrian was bleeding. Adrian ran a hand through his hair, his composure cracking. "Look, I needed the money. I was going to pay it back once the new deals closed. Vanessa, she needed support." He gestured weakly toward her. Vanessa's head snapped toward him, her eyes flashing. "Support?" she hissed. "You told me it was your money. You told me you had everything under control. I didn't sign up to be dragged into some scandal that could destroy me." Adrian grabbed her wrist, his voice sharp. "Keep your mouth shut." She yanked her hand free, her voice rising with fury and fear. "No, Adrian, I won't. You lied to me. You made me believe I was safe with you. And now what? I'll be ruined too? Do you think I'm going to go down with you?" Her words sliced through the cabin, raw and desperate. The investors exchanged looks, some almost smirking at the implosion happening before them. Alexander stood silent, letting the chaos expose more than he ever could with words. Emily's heart pounded. Each confession was like a stone dropping into her chest. She had endured his cruelty, his neglect, his betrayal. But hearing it spoken aloud, hearing Vanessa admit the lies, there was no denying the truth anymore. "You told me," Vanessa continued, her voice trembling, "that your brother was jealous of you, that you were the real brains of the family, that soon you'd have more than him. You said I'd be by your side when it happened. Was that a lie too?" Adrian's face twisted with rage. "Don't twist this, Vanessa. I gave you everything." "You gave me nothing but borrowed luxury," she snapped back. "You promised me power, stability. Instead, you gave me scraps paid for with stolen money. Do you know what happens to women tied to scandals like this? We're discarded. Forgotten. I won't let you drag me down. Her words rang with desperation, but beneath the panic was truth. Vanessa was a survivor, and she could see Adrian's ship sinking. Alexander finally stepped forward, his voice like steel. You see, Adrian, even she sees what you've become. You used her, just as you've used everyone else. Emily, this family, our name, even the people who trusted you with their investments. And now the mask is gone. Adrian's breathing was ragged, his eyes darting between Vanessa, Emily, and his brother. You can't do this to me. You can't all turn against me. Emily's lips parted, her voice breaking the silence. It was the first time she had spoken since the assault. You already did this to yourself, Adrian. Her words were soft, trembling, but they carried more weight than any accusation. The entire cabin stilled, listening. Emily's eyes shimmered with tears, but her voice grew stronger. I begged you to love me. I begged you to see our baby, but you didn't care. You chose her. You chose your pride. And now the whole world knows what you are. Adrian flinched as though struck. For a moment he looked almost human, haunted, broken. But the flash of vulnerability vanished quickly, replaced by anger. You think you're better than me, Emily? You think anyone will believe you without me? You're nothing without this family name. Alexander's voice cut like a whip. You're wrong, Adrian. She is everything this family should stand for. Loyalty, dignity, resilience. And you're the one who has nothing. Vanessa's laugh was sharp, bitter. He's right. You're finished, Adrian. And I'm not going down with you. I'll find someone who can actually keep his promises. Adrian stared at her in disbelief, betrayal flashing across his face. You're leaving me? Vanessa shrugged, her voice dripping with contempt. You've got nothing left to offer. Why would I stay? The words hung in the air like a final verdict. Adrian, the man who had once strutted with arrogance, now sat crumbling in his seat. His mistress had turned on him. His wife had spoken against him. His brother had destroyed his facade. Emily exhaled shakily, a tear slipping down her cheek. For so long powerless, voiceless. But tonight, Adrian's betrayal had been dragged into the light for all to see. And in that light, she felt something stir inside her, a strength she thought she had lost. Alexander straightened, his voice final. When we land, this will go further. The board will hear. The press will hear. And Adrian, your downfall will be public. Adrian's shoulders slumped, his head hanging low. He had built his world on lies, and now that world was collapsing around him. Emily closed her eyes, her hand pressing to her stomach. For the first time in months, she whispered to her baby, "We're going to be okay." And though her heart still ached, she believed it. But what she didn't realize yet was that this exposure was only the first step, because the real fight for her dignity was still to come. The jet hummed steadily as it cut through the dark night sky, but for Emily, the world had gone silent. The shouting, the accusations, Vanessa's shrill betrayal, Adrian's panicked defenses, all of it blurred into a distant echo. She sat slumped against the leather seat, her trembling hands pressed protectively over her belly. Her body ached, not just from the violent tug on her hair, but from the weight of everything that had been ripped open. She had tried to hold herself together, to endure the humiliation quietly as she always had. But now, with the truth exposed, with Adrian's mask shattered, she felt like the floor had been pulled from under her feet. Her chest heaved as tears spilled freely, unstoppable now. She didn't care who saw. Not the investors, not Vanessa, not even Adrian. The pain was too great to hide. She turned her face toward the oval window, where the stars blinked cold and distant against the endless black. She whispered so faintly only her baby could hear, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry you have to feel all this with me." Memories flooded her like a dam breaking. She saw herself at 22, the hopeful girl who had fallen in love with Adrian's charm. He had swept her off her feet with grand gestures and promises of forever. She remembered the way her heart had raced when he first took her hand at the gala where they met, whispering, "You're different. You're the one I've been waiting for." She remembered the wedding, lavish, sparkling, a storybook dream. Her parents had cried tears of joy, believing she was marrying into security and love. She had believed it too. She had walked down the aisle with hope in her chest and stars in her eyes, never imagining that those stars would one day turn to ashes. She remembered the sacrifices, how she had given up her career to support his, how she had traded her own dreams for his ambitions. She had believed in him when no one else did, had stood by him when investors laughed at his early failures. She had been his anchor, his confidant, his biggest believer. And this was her reward, sitting humiliated on a jet while he flaunted another woman. Her sobs deepened, her body curling forward, her belly pressed tight against her thighs as she hugged herself, rocking gently as though trying to soothe her own broken heart. The baby kicked, and it only made the ache sharper. "You deserve a better father," she whispered through the tears. "You deserve better than this." The cabin was quieter now. The investors exchanged uneasy glances, uncomfortable with the raw display of pain before them. Vanessa sat stiffly, her lips pressed thin, her confidence shattered. Adrian sat hunched, seething silently, his eyes fixed on the floor. Only Alexander watched Emily closely, his jaw tight, his fists clenching at his sides. "Emily," he said softly, his voice steady but not cold. "You don't have to carry this weight alone anymore." She shook her head, unable to meet his eyes. "But I already did. For years, I gave him everything I had, and now there's nothing left of me." Her voice cracked, the words spilling out like broken glass. "Do you know what it feels like to be invisible? To live in a house full of gold and marble but feel like a ghost? To watch the man you love look at you like you're a burden instead of his partner?" Her tears blurred her vision, her voice trembling with anguish. "I begged him to see me, to love me, and all I got was silence, or worse, cruelty." Her confession pierced the cabin. It wasn't just pain, it was the sound of years of suffering finally breaking free. The investors shifted awkwardly, some lowering their eyes. Even Vanessa, for all her arrogance, looked away. Adrian finally spoke, his tone sharp, defensive. "You think you're some kind of victim? You had everything. The house, the money, the name. Do you know how many women would kill to have what you had?" Emily's head snapped toward him, her face streaked with tears but her eyes blazing with fury. "None of it mattered without love, Adrian. None of it. What good is a mansion if it feels like a prison? What good is money if it comes with betrayal? You broke me. You broke us." Her voice cracked on the last word and she collapsed back against the seat, her sobs returning with a vengeance. Alexander's hands tightened on the edge of the table, his face a mask of restrained rage. He wanted to shout at his brother, to drag him across the floor and force him to look at the woman he had destroyed. But he knew this wasn't his moment. It was Emily's, and she was finally letting the truth out. Her mind spun further back, to the lonely nights in their penthouse when Adrian never came home, to the faint perfume lingering on his shirts, the lipstick stains she tried to pretend she didn't see, to the endless waiting, the excuses, the gaslighting that made her question her own sanity. She remembered standing in the nursery one night, staring at the tiny crib she had decorated alone. She had whispered to her unborn baby, "Maybe he'll come around when you're here. Maybe you'll remind him of love." But tonight had proven otherwise. Her voice broke again as she whispered into the silence of the cabin, "I don't know how much more I can take." The baby kicked again, stronger this time, as though answering her. Emily pressed both hands over her belly, tears dripping down her chin. "I have to be strong for you, but I don't know if I can." For a moment the only sound was her sobbing and the steady hum of the engines. Then, slowly, Alexander moved. He crossed the aisle, lowering himself to her level. His voice was low, steady, meant only for her. "You can," he said. "You're stronger than you think, and you're not alone anymore." Emily looked up at him, her tear-stained face filled with doubt. "But what if I am? What if when this plane lands I have nowhere to go?" Alexander's gaze didn't waver. "Then you come to me. You'll have protection. You'll have a place. You'll have the chance to rebuild." Her lips trembled, fresh tears spilling down. "Why? Why would you help me?" His eyes softened, but his voice remained firm. "Because you deserve it. And because my brother doesn't get to be the end of your story." Emily stared at him, her heart pounding. His words wrapped around her like a lifeline thrown into stormy seas. And though her body still trembled, though her grief was still raw, something inside her shifted. It was small, fragile, but undeniable. A spark. For the first time in a long time, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, her story wasn't over. But as the night stretched on and the jet sped closer to its destination, she didn't yet know that her collapse tonight would become the foundation of her greatest rise. The cabin of the jet felt heavy, filled with the weight of unshed tears and the ruins of a marriage. Emily sat back against her seat, drained from her breakdown. Her eyes were swollen, her voice hoarse, but her hands never left her belly. She whispered to her child as though the tiny life inside her was the only anchor keeping her afloat. Across from her, Adrian sulked in bitter silence, his pride in tatters. His mistress had turned against him, his brother had humiliated him, and his wife, his once quiet, submissive wife, had finally spoken with a strength that cut through his arrogance. He couldn't control the narrative anymore, and it terrified him. But Alexander Carter wasn't finished. He stood at the center of the cabin, broad shoulders squared, his commanding presence demanding attention. When he spoke, his voice was measured, steady, but every word carried the weight of a hammer falling. "Emily," he said, turning his gaze to her, "there's something you need to know, something I should have told you a long time ago." Her brows furrowed, she looked at him with confusion, her lips parting. "What do you mean?" Adrian scoffed, trying to recover a shred of control. "Don't listen to him, Emily. He's just trying to turn you against me. He's always envied me, always tried to steal what's mine." Alexander's glare shut him down instantly. "You stole from yourself, Adrian, and you've lost everything because of it. But Emily," he softened his tone as he returned his gaze to her, "you've had more power than you realize all along." Emily blinked, shaking her head. "I don't understand." Alexander reached into his briefcase again, pulling out another folder, this one bound with a gold seal. He laid it on the table between them. "This is Father's will, the one you were never shown." The cabin fell utterly silent. Adrian's face drained of color, his eyes widening in shock. "You wouldn't," he hissed. "I would," Alexander replied coldly. "And I am." Emily hesitated before reaching forward with trembling hands. She opened the folder, her eyes scanning the elegant script. And then she saw it, her own name written in black ink right alongside Alexander's. Her breath caught. "What is this?" "It's the truth," Alexander said firmly. "When you married Adrian, Father updated the will. He saw you as part of this family, not just as Adrian's wife, but as someone who embodied the values he wanted the Carter name to carry forward. Loyalty, integrity, strength. You were added as a beneficiary, not Adrian. You." Emily's heart pounded in her chest. Her vision blurred as she reread the words again and again, unable to believe them. All this time, she had thought she was powerless, a burden, an afterthought. But here it was in writing. She wasn't nothing. She was an heir to the empire. Adrian shot up from his seat, fury boiling over. "Lies. She doesn't deserve it. She's nothing but a charity case. Father never would have." "He did," Alexander cut in, his voice sharp. "And deep down you know why. He saw through you, Adrian. He knew you lacked the discipline, the character, the strength to lead, so he safeguarded the family's future. Emily was his choice, not you." Gasps rippled through the investors. Vanessa stared wide-eyed, her jaws slack. Even the attendants froze, the revelation sending shockwaves through the cabin. Emily pressed a hand to her chest, her heart racing. I don't know what to say." Alexander stepped closer, his tone softening. "You don't have to say anything, but you need to understand. You are not powerless. You've never been. Adrian tried to strip you of your dignity, but he can't take away who you are. And now you have the legal right to protect yourself and your child." Her lips trembled as fresh tears filled her eyes. Not tears of despair this time, but of disbelief, of overwhelming relief. For so long she had lived in shadows, convinced she had no voice, no strength. And now, suddenly, the truth illuminated everything. Adrian's voice cracked with desperation. "Emily, listen to me. Don't let him twist this. You're my wife. We're supposed to be a team. You can't side with him. You can't destroy me." Emily turned to him slowly, her tears still falling. But when she spoke, her voice carried a quiet strength that startled even herself. "You destroyed yourself, Adrian, and you destroyed us. I begged you for love, for respect, and you gave me betrayal. You don't get to ask for loyalty now." Her words struck harder than any blow. Adrian staggered back, his face crumbling. For the first time he looked small, weak, defeated. Vanessa leaned forward, her smirk returning in a twisted form. "So, she has the money? The power. Looks like you really are finished, Adrian." She laughed cruelly, but the sound rang hollow. Even she seemed shaken by the revelation. Emily ignored her. For the first time, she wasn't looking at Vanessa. She wasn't looking at Adrian. She was looking at herself, at the strength she had forgotten, at the resilience buried beneath years of pain. Her hand rested firmly on her belly as she whispered, "We're going to be okay. Mama's not weak anymore." Alexander inclined his head slightly, a rare softness flickering in his eyes. "That's the truth Father saw in you, and now the world will see it too." Emily closed the folder, her fingers trembling but resolute. She looked at Adrian one last time, her voice calm but final. "When this plane lands, I'm filing for divorce. And this time, you won't take anything from me. Not my child, not my dignity, not my future." Adrian sank back into his chair, his shoulders collapsing under the weight of defeat. The mighty facade he had built for years was gone, and in its place was nothing but a broken man. The jet hummed on, but inside the cabin, a new energy filled the air. Emily wasn't just surviving anymore, she was beginning to rise. And no one, not Adrian, not Vanessa, not even her own fears, could stop what was coming next. The roar of the jet's engines eventually softened into silence as the plane touched down in Paris. But inside Emily Carter's heart, a new fire had begun to roar, louder than any machine. She stepped onto the tarmac with trembling legs, her body still bearing the weight of humiliation, betrayal, and heartbreak. But also something else. Determination. For the first time since her wedding day, she no longer clung to Adrian's shadow. She no longer felt chained to his choices or his cruelty. The revelation of her place in the Carter will had cracked open a door she never knew existed. And through it, she glimpsed a version of herself she had almost forgotten. A woman who could stand tall, who could fight back, who could protect not only herself but her child. Alexander stayed close but gave her space. He didn't hover, didn't crowd her. Instead, he offered quiet guidance. "Tomorrow, you'll meet with the family's attorneys in Paris," he explained as their convoy of black cars pulled away from the airport. "They'll confirm everything I showed you on the jet. You'll see for yourself that the power is yours now. But Emily, power means nothing unless you use it." She nodded, her hands resting on her belly. "I don't know if I'm ready." Alexander's sharp gaze softened. "You weren't ready for betrayal either, but you survived it, and now you'll do more than survive. You'll rise." The words echoed in her mind long after they arrived at the hotel, a 5-star monument of glass and marble, the kind of place where billionaires conducted quiet wars behind closed doors. Emily followed a staff member to her suite, but when she opened the gilded doors, she froze. The room wasn't just luxurious, it was prepared. On one side, a row of designer dresses hung in shades of power. Deep reds, emerald greens, midnight blacks. On the vanity, carefully arranged makeup and jewelry gleamed under the lights. And beside the bed, a note in Alexander's hand. "You are stronger than you know. Wear it. Show it." Her knees buckled, and she sank onto the bed, tears threatening to spill. No one had ever given her tools to rise before. For years, she had been told to shrink, to submit, to stay quiet. And now here was proof that someone believed in her potential. That night, Emily barely slept. Her dreams were restless, filled with echoes of Adrian's cruelty, Vanessa's laughter, and Alexander's steady voice. By dawn, she rose with a decision. She would no longer be the woman hiding in the corner, clutching her stomach in silence. She would become someone her child could look up to. The transformation began slowly. The first step was physical. She stood before the mirror, staring at her pale reflection. Her hair was tangled, her skin blotched from crying. She looked broken. But as she let the stylist Alexander had arranged step in, something shifted. Hours passed in a blur of curling irons, brushes, and powders. When it was over, Emily hardly recognized herself. Her hair cascaded in soft waves, framing her face with elegance. Her eyes shone, no longer dulled by pain, but sharpened by resolve. The swelling around her cheeks had faded, replaced with a glow that spoke not of wealth, but of resilience. The second step was clothing. She slipped into a dark green gown that hugged her curves modestly but powerfully, the fabric flowing like strength itself. Around her neck she fastened a simple but striking diamond pendant, a gift from the Carter estate she had once tucked away in shame, believing she didn't deserve it. Now it rested against her heart like armor. The third step was internal. She stood before the mirror again, her hands resting on her stomach. "We're not weak anymore," she whispered to her unborn child. We're not his victims, we're survivors, fighters, and tomorrow we'll show the world. When she stepped out of the suite that evening, even Alexander paused. For a moment, his carefully composed expression softened into something almost like awe. "You look," he began, then stopped himself. Instead, he simply nodded. "You look ready." Emily smiled faintly, a mix of nerves and determination curling in her chest. "I don't feel ready, but maybe that's the point. I've been waiting for Adrian to give me strength. Now I see. I had it all along." They spent the evening in preparation. Alexander coached her on what was to come. A gala hosted by one of the Carter family's closest business partners, where Adrian was expected to appear and spin his downfall as mere gossip. Emily would attend, not as a silent wife, but as the woman with the will, the truth, and the strength to shatter his lies. She practiced standing tall, speaking clearly, looking directly into the eyes of those who doubted her. Each time she stumbled, Alexander reminded her, "Don't think of Adrian. Think of your child. Protecting your child is protecting yourself." By midnight, Emily collapsed into bed exhausted, but this time, her exhaustion carried purpose. She dreamed not of betrayal, but of standing in the light, unafraid. The next morning, she woke with a calm clarity. The fear was still there. Fear of Adrian's rage, fear of public whispers, fear of stumbling in for the powerful men and women who would judge her. But beneath that fear was a steel she hadn't felt before. She dressed deliberately, choosing a gown of deep crimson, red for survival, red for power, red for the blood she had shed in silence, now transformed into strength. Her heels clicked against the marble floor as she walked, each step louder, more certain. Alexander met her at the entrance, offering his arm. "Tonight," he said, "they'll all see the truth, not just about Adrian, but about you." Emily placed her hand on his arm, steadying herself. "Then let's make sure they never forget it." The convoy carried them to the gala, where chandeliers glittered and cameras flashed. The moment Emily stepped into the grand hall, whispers rippled across the crowd. People expected her to arrive broken, humiliated, invisible. Instead, they saw a woman transformed, strong, radiant, unbowed. Adrian, already inside with Vanessa clinging to his side, froze mid-laugh when he spotted her. His smirk faltered, his glass nearly slipping from his hand. For the first time, he looked like the one who didn't belong. Emily met his gaze, unflinching. She walked forward, every step measured, every breath steady. She wasn't his shadow anymore. She wasn't his victim. She was the storm coming to claim justice. And as the crowd turned to watch, the stage was set for the public reckoning Adrian Carter had feared all along. The grand hall shimmered with chandeliers, a cathedral of wealth and influence where reputations were made or shattered in a single night. The gala was supposed to be Adrian Carter's chance to recover, to charm investors and dismiss the whispers that had begun swirling around him. But when Emily stepped into the room, glowing in crimson, her chin high, her step steady, the night became something else entirely. Every head turned, every whisper sharpened. People had expected a broken woman, hiding from humiliation. Instead, they saw power wrapped in grace, pain transformed into strength. Alexander walked beside her like a shadow of steel, his presence silent but commanding. But it was Emily who drew the eyes, who held the room in a way Adrian never truly had. Adrian's glass trembled in his hand as he watched her cross the hall. Vanessa clung to his arm, her nails digging into his sleeve, her forced smile betraying unease. He tried to regain his composure, raising his voice with false bravado. Well, look who decided to show up. Emily, you're full of surprises." Emily stopped a few feet away, her eyes locking onto his. Her voice, calm and clear, carried across the room. "You're right, Adrian, I am full of surprises. But tonight, you'll be the one surprised." The crowd murmured. Alexander stepped slightly aside, giving her the stage. For years she had been the silent wife, but tonight was hers. Emily lifted a folder from her clutch, the same folder Alexander had shown her on the jet. She held it up, her voice steady. "This is my name in the Carter will, the one your father updated when we married. He believed in loyalty, in dignity, in strength, and he entrusted me with the future of this family. Not you." Gasps rippled through the hall. Cameras flashed, investors leaned forward, hungry for the spectacle. Adrian's face turned red, his smirk collapsing. "That's a lie," he shouted, his voice cracking. "She's nothing without me." Emily stepped closer, her heels clicking like a judge's gavel. Nothing without you? Her eyes glistened with controlled fury. I gave up everything for you. My career, my dreams, my dignity. And in return, you gave me betrayal. You laughed while your mistress pulled my hair on a plane filled with investors. You stole from your own company to fund your affair. And you dare stand here and call me nothing? The room fell silent, all eyes locked on her. Even Vanessa froze, her grip on Adrian's arm loosening. Alexander's voice rang out from the side, deep and commanding. She speaks the truth. The documents are verified. The board has already been notified. Adrian Carter's time is over. Adrian's world crumbled before the crowd. Investors exchanged glances, their expressions turning cold, calculating. They weren't looking at a leader anymore. They were looking at a liability. Vanessa, sensing the shift, stepped away from Adrian, her voice sharp. You told me you were in control. You told me none of this would touch us. But you're finished, Adrian. I won't go down with you. She tossed her glass onto the table, the champagne spilling like wasted promises, and stalked away under the glare of cameras. Adrian reached out desperately. Vanessa, don't you dare. But she was gone, leaving him alone. Emily's heart pounded, but she stood tall. The crowd wasn't just witnessing Adrian's downfall. They were witnessing her rebirth. She raised her chin, her voice steady though her eyes brimmed with tears. For years, I let myself believe I was weak, that I had to stay silent, that I had to endure. But tonight, I stand here to remind every woman in this room, silence is not strength, enduring cruelty is not loyalty, and love does not mean losing yourself. The hall erupted in applause, sharp and thunderous. Some clapped cautiously, others passionately. But together they built a storm of approval that drowned out Adrian's sputtering protests. He stumbled forward, his voice breaking. You'll regret this, Emily. You'll regret turning against me. Alexander stepped in, his presence like a wall. No, Adrian. The only regret here is yours. You had everything. A loyal wife, a future child, a place in this family, and you threw it all away. Two board members approached, flanking Adrian. One spoke firmly. You're done, Carter. Effective immediately. Your shares are frozen. Your seat on the board is revoked. Security will escort you out. Adrian's face twisted with rage and disbelief. You can't do this. This is my legacy. No, Emily said softly, her voice carrying more power than his shouts. This was your prison. My legacy begins tonight. The guard seized his arms, pulling him toward the exit. Cameras flashed wildly, capturing every second of the spectacle. Adrian fought, cursed, but it was useless. His downfall was public, brutal, and complete. As the doors closed behind him, silence lingered for a beat before giving way to applause once more, applause for Emily. She stood still, her chest rising and falling with emotion. Tears slid down her cheeks, but they were no longer the tears of a broken woman. They were the tears of release, of victory, of catharsis. She pressed a hand to her belly, whispering through the roar of the crowd, We're free, my love. We're finally free. Alexander approached, his voice low but proud. You did it. You didn't just survive, you conquered. Emily turned to him, her lips trembling into a faint smile. I didn't do it alone. For a moment, the hall seemed to fade, leaving only the two of them standing in the glow of triumph. Emily wasn't naive. Her journey wasn't over. There would still be challenges, still whispers, still wounds to heal. But tonight, she had proven something to herself and to the world. She was no longer defined by Adrian Carter's cruelty. She was Emily Carter, stronger, wiser, unbreakable. As the applause swelled, Alexander leaned close enough for only her to hear. Father was right. You are the future of this family, and I'll stand beside you to make sure no one ever takes that from you again. Emily nodded, her tears shining in the chandelier light. She looked out at the sea of faces, no longer afraid of their judgment. She had faced betrayal, humiliation, despair, and she had risen. The night had begun as Adrian's chance at redemption. It ended as Emily's coronation. And as the cameras captured her standing tall in crimson, her hand on her belly, the world would remember this night as the moment a broken wife became unstoppable. So my wonderful friends, that's how this story comes to a close. If you're still here with me until now, it means something in Emily's journey touched your heart too. Life always tests us, but as Marcus Aurelius said, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Just like Emily, we can all rise from betrayal, find healing, and protect our dignity. If this story moved you, please like this video, share it with someone who might need hope, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel so we can keep walking through these powerful journeys together.